Let me start again then. There's a new feature in our hometown newspaper. It started a couple months ago, and it was a picture of a child, an adult, a senior citizen, and they were all smiling. And the caption was, "I'm smiling because," and then the answer came from the child or the adult or the senior citizen. Well, I'm smiling. And why is because I'm attending another AMI conference. And I'm among people that I've had and do have a tremendous respect for. Several have been very helpful to me. And I'm smiling because I got the best subject anybody can have on what it would mean if the federal government created their own money supply. You all could go for hours with it. I'm going to engineer that answer for you in the way that I feel comfortable doing. So I'm going to start by saying the sovereignty plan was what Steve said. We wanted to get infrastructure built. Now, if we build infrastructure, then the public sees it. They can go right out there and they can even touch that bridge or that sewer system or whatever it is. It's not smoke. It's not blowing in the wind. It is a matter that they can see being built and where the money is going. Now, obviously, if we can do it with interest-free loans, and I stuck with loans, of course there's room for grants if the government's creating the money, but I concentrated on loans. We've had plenty of information and publicity regarding the misuse of earmarks in Congress, but some of them are very, very necessary and needed. So, but I still wanted to stick with loans because in many areas they don't get anything. And consequently, if their congressman isn't working as hard as he should or she should, they're going to be left out. Freeport, Illinois is my home. It's in northwestern Illinois here. There is a 4-lane highway from New York through the states into Illinois, and Highway 20 hooks onto I-90. Highway 20 then comes right through Freeport, and that's where the 4-lane stops. For the next 50 miles, it's a dangerous 2-lane highway. And then it picks up just across the river at Dubuque and continues on 4 lanes. Now, I think we've been overlooked in all the years that this has gone on. And the accidents that happen have been marked accordingly. So we need infrastructure. So how are we going to do it? So I came up with a formula that would allow states, counties, and local governments to get interest-free loans. I had schools in there too. But believe it or not, in Congress, and we've had numerous committees investigate, there is no way under the present system that we can include schools. Anytime you mention schools, it comes under education, and every time we mention education, then they deal with something else. They don't deal with infrastructure. So what I'm going to show you here in a figure is that it does. My figure I'm going to show you does not include schools. But anyways, obviously these projects can be built for half to a third the cost if you don't have interest. And the projects are going to be more safe, and Steve's already mentioned in Minnesota. I've got the pictures of a small bridge in my community that I had filmed, and while we were waiting for the cameraman to set up, I was talking with the director, and I looked over at the cameraman, and he had a ballpoint pen, and he stuck it through the steel structures, one of those bridges that go up this way, then across, and then down that way, and he was plunging it through this girder. The whole engineering concept of that bridge was already lost, and our milk trucks from our farm area go across that bridge every single day. That is an accident ready to happen. Now, if you're taking a loan, you have and show more responsibility because you know you got to pay it back. But so you're not going to get into frivolous things. I would think that sometimes to ask the government to pay for a bike path or a concession stand at a high school, that should never happen, in my opinion. If you want to build it, pay for it. And you can get interest-free loans to pay for it. Now, another example why this is good is property tax is a four-letter word. Where I come from and I sense where you come from. The way bonds are floated now, you will get a higher interest on those bonds to pay if it's not paid with property tax. If the community wanted to use sales tax, if they wanted to use user tax or some other system, you're penalized for that. Under the sovereignty plan, whatever source of income you're going to use to pay back the loan over the 20 or 30 years is acceptable. Now, I used the formula, and this is the first of the numbers to be aware of. Every single congressional district, of which there are 435, would get $700 million in a 5-year period. Every single community in your district, from the smallest community to the larger communities. Over the period of 5 years, they each would have their share based on the formula. I used the formula that every state would get $200 times their population, every city $600, every county $200. So they would have that they could depend on. They might not get it all the first year. Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, of course, wouldn't. They'd get about 1/5 of it. But they could get that paid out over that 5-year period. And of course, it could be repeated after that. So it's got to be transparent. And the public could see, published by the federal government, okay, on this month, here's where the money went. Here's where the loans went. They were building this, this, and this, and this. And you could come down and see what it is in your own district. If they built if the congressman in your area got money to build a new turnaround, whatever, and a new exit from one of the highways 55 miles from where you live, and in an area that you probably would not use it, you're not going to be enthused about that. But in your area that you have access to, your city, your county, you can have something built and you know what it is. And that's a plus for congressmen, that they can come into your area and they can say they helped you build that or this or what. And sometimes under the current system, there's nothing that's ever been brought your way. And I go back to my 50 miles of nothing that we have been waiting and waiting for years to get some help on. Now, can the federal government use it for federal things? Of course. And the best example is Professor Bill Hickson wrote this. Whoever doesn't have this blue sheet, I got some for you, and I'll get it to you afterwards. This is quickly how the United States funded World War II. $80 billion was created, but only 20 from the federal government, and the banks created the other 60. We'll talk more about that another time. I want to talk about bonds and the unknown, or not the unknown so much, but unrealized issue called interest there and bond fees. And on that, I'm going to refer to this gold page. And again, I'll get more to you who don't have it. This is an actual fact that took place in northwestern Illinois, where the city needed to build a $32.5 million waste disposal plant. The community is growing like topsy. They needed that waste disposal plant. But they're being charged 2% for bond fees. And then the interest, and I show in this, if it was at 6.5% over a 20-year period, instead of paying back $32.5 billion, they're paying back $60.173 billion. And if they funded it at 7.5% interest on those bonds, it's up over $65 billion. And if it's over a 30-year payback, it's over 84 billion. But if you do it interest-free, it's still 32.5 billion. And now, I want to talk about a bond. Nobody challenges the bond people. And yet, they add 2%. And why is it that we're paying 2%, unchallenged, always 2%? In the New York area, it's even larger. But the 2% goes to a bond counsel. He's got to determine, well, how best that you repay this and so forth. And then a rating service, that would be like Moody's. Moody's would charge about $10,000. And then there's printing costs. The printing costs in this issue here, $2,000 for this $32.5 billion. In Wall Street Journal, you got to put an ad in the Wall Street Journal, make sure everybody understands that these bonds are for sale, and that's another $1,000. The mailings will cost about $1,600 in this issue. And then there's the bond registrar, that usually is a bank, and they send out the interest to the bond holders every 6 months for, let's say, 20 years. If it is for 20 years, it's 20,000 more. And then, of course, they go to the, that's the bond registrar. And then, of course, the Moody's, I mentioned, they get $10,000. So it adds up to $34,600. $34,600. And you want to quickly know what 2% of 32.5 million is? Well, it's $650,000. $650,000 the bond fees were. And what I just rattled off as expenses totaled $34,600. And when I asked the question, what do you need the other 600 and some thousand for? Then the stuttering came. Well, we don't know if Lake in the Hills is going to be able to pay it back. You know, they might fail. I'm going to ask you this question. What city or county do you know that has failed? And don't tell me Orange County in California. Don't tell me Cuyahoga County in Ohio either. Now, some of those places paid later. It took them a longer time maybe. But they didn't throw their hands up and go bankrupt. For goodness sake, your city owns your sidewalks and your streets and your sewer system and your garbage collection. They're not going to go bankrupt. And Lake in the Hills has never gone bankrupt. My city of 150 years has never gone bankrupt. And why are we continually paying this? Well, congressional aides have told me, Ken, if this ever got traction, if this bill ever got into a hearing, we'd have all these bond people in here. And I'd say, that's right. And you're going to have a choice. You're going to have a choice of helping all these people back in your district, building all these items that they need. Or you could go the other way. What do you think it is once the people know about this? I thought it was a slam dunk after that. Now, so the 2% here, that's the 2% I wanted to bring to your attention. Now, there's one other item. Municipal bonds purchased by generally the wealthiest, and some institutions, of course, is tax-free. Tax-free. So they get the interest and they don't pay taxes on it. You know what? That's the third thing here. The federal government loses $20.1 billion a year on municipal bonds, the interest not being taxable. They lose that tax. Therefore, you're going to have to pay some more. Now, Steve brought up the subject, well, what will banks think? And on this, again, I can smile because starting in 1989, I got to know Ed Mrkvicka. I doubt if any of you know the name Ed Mrkvicka, but I want to tell you who he is and what he did for me. Ed Mrkvicka was chairman, president, and CEO of a bank here in northwestern Illinois for many years, and a successful operation it was. Then he left that and became chairman, president, CEO of an organization called Reliance Enterprises. He's a registered investment advisor. certified international financier. He wrote the books, the bank book, How to Revoke Your Bank's License to Steal and Save Up to $100,000. Another book, The Battle Your Bank and Win, publisher William Morrow and Company. The other one was published by Harper and Row. So these are not books that don't get action. He's got several awards. He's been on 400 radio stations. They call him when they need some expertise regarding banking. So I asked him the question, will this hurt banks? And this is this banker's response. I would think not. Any perceived harm would be illusory. As worst, banks would simply have to redirect a portion of their investment portfolio. This is whatever monies they were buying municipal bonds with. If they're not there to be bought, they have to do something else. With a portion of their investment portfolio to balance the tax considerations. Their bottom line need not change. There is an important side benefit, assuming that the substantial portion of that redirection would be aimed at the consumer. Bank customers would see an additional lending dollars available at the retail level. That would obviously help small business expansion, the consumer cost of money, housing trades, etc. Well, I started to rely on him. And then 2 years later, 1991, he wrote this. I know sovereignty would be successful, although it would take time to convince those in political power that there's a better way than to continue the present, albeit failed policy. One would have to be in favor of crumbling cities, rotting bridges, unsafe school structures, outdated airports, etc., and our rapidly escalating national debt to oppose this most important populist movement. Well then, one thing led to another, and one of our supporters got in touch with his senator, Senator Burns from Montana. And Senator Burns didn't know what to do, but he went to, of all people, I think he did go to the Federal Reserve first, and they told him to go to, or they put it off, gave the question to the Congressional Research Service. They wrote, this person with Congressional Research Service named Gail McKinnon wrote a 4-page letter to Senator Burns. And this is, it was quite scathing regarding sovereignty in this proposal. But here's the banker again coming to my rescue. First of all, he said, it is constitutionally correct. It'll create jobs, it'll increase tax revenues, it'll help repair inner cities, build new airports, etc. It'll strengthen and help stabilize the economy long term. It will not adversely impact any financial markets, bank, etc. It, if phased in correctly, is not inflationary any more than any added dollars to the money supply is inflationary. It has the potential to lower taxes at all levels. Of course, this is not inconsistent with increased tax revenue. It will work. Lastly, the bottom line is this. What we are doing isn't working. Why would we want to continue the present policy? Why wouldn't it be better, for example, if a bridge in Rockford could be built for cost instead of cost plus 30 years worth of interest? Sovereignty is nothing more than going back to the future as it was never intended that taxpayers pay interest on money Congress has the right to coin. Now, then came a 32-page resume of the sovereignty proposal. 32 pages. John Hodson countered with about 20 pages. And so did, again, my friend the banker. Now, I just want to read you this because we got friends out there and we got people that know what we're doing and believe what we're doing, understand what we're doing, and are in favor of what we're doing. Ed Mrkvicka wrote, with all due respect, Mr. Mackinnon's opinion is a perfect example of why our national debt is out of control. He states in the second paragraph of his 4-page letter, "Let me dispense with one of the central themes of the proposal. This is the view that interest payments are socially unproductive, wasteful, drastically increase the cost of projects." Of course interest drastically increases the cost of projects. For him to apply otherwise is so fundamentally wrong that nothing he says from that point forward should be taken seriously. Notwithstanding, I read on. It is not surprising that his further objections lack substance and/or are based on misunderstanding of what would have been obvious, i.e., sovereignty, as we've discussed before, would have to be phased in over an extended period of time. Using that guideline, your proposal would have no more impact on the economy, the public sector, banks, and so forth than any other increase in the money supply. We would be trading public works interest-generating dollars for interest-free dollars for a specific revolving fund, a pool. Now, he sensed that, okay, as this money is paid back, it just revolves and goes back out. You know, it can be done that way. There's no difference. If it can be taken out of circulation and recreated again, the same amount, that's the same. It's not any difference. Sovereignty is not a proposal for reducing tax burdens, that is what Mackinnon says. Deserves special note. He elaborated, properly viewed, it is a proposal for shifting tax burdens. This is what Mackinnon from the congressional research says. He thinks it's a proposal to shift the tax burdens either to the federal taxpayer or to those who would deposit at financial institutions. Once again, he's wrong. By reducing the true cost of public works by the amount of the interest, the cost of the taxpayer would, of course, be correspondingly reduced. And banks, utilizing a phased-in, have nothing to fear from sovereignty. In fact, as it will have a positive effect on the economy, banks and their depositors, contrary to Mr. Mackinnon, will receive benefit. Hard it is to believe that this representative of CRS is suggesting that interest is a good thing and therefore the taxpayers pays for a project. The more the project, the better, as reflected by this statement. The interest rate paid by the government is then a measure of the social usefulness of their projects. This is the type of nonsense from which debts of our $4 trillion grow. In other words, well, we won't charge this much interest, we'll charge this much because the project is worth more. Imagine that. Okay, what I wanted to point out is that among us we have good people. I wanted to bring up Ed Mrkvicka because it's a name you are not familiar with, but I am, and what he's done for us. Now, so what can we do? What's the mechanics of what we do from here on? See this book? This is the Congress, name of every congressman and every senator and all their committees that they're on. This page is the key. This is the key. This bill, if it's introduced like it was back in 1999 when we got the sovereignty bill introduced as number 1452, it was directed to the banking committee, and rightfully so. I thought, well, maybe it would go to the infrastructure committee. No, it went to the banking committee. That's understandable. And from the banking committee, then it's directed to one of their subcommittees. And today, they changed the names a little bit and tweak them a little bit, but today that domestic and international monetary policy, trade and technology, that's the subcommittee. That is the subcommittee. And so, ideally, what we need to do is have, ideally, the chairman of that subcommittee introduce the bill. Now, he's the more powerful person on that committee. And his word is taken very seriously by other members of the committee because he's the one that controls which bill is going to get a hearing. Now, that's critically important because in the last session of Congress, there were over 6,000 bills introduced. So introducing a bill is one thing, but getting a hearing, that's something else again. Obviously, there were no hearings for all 6,000 bills that were ever introduced. So, it's critically important then that the person who introduces it, if not the chairman, another person on that same committee. And the reason why, each committee members hold their position on that committee zealously, and rightfully so. This is their committee. This is the one they wanted to be put on, and that's that. Now, can you imagine how many of them are submitting bills that need to have a hearing? Therefore, how much of a chance do we have of getting a hearing for the bill if it's introduced by somebody else? Even, honestly, forcefully, so forth. So back in 1999, Congressman Ray LaHood was the one that introduced the bill. He was a Republican, and we have to deal with the majority party. I don't know if there's ever a bill that had a hearing that was introduced by the minority group. Why would there be? I mean, these people are on this committee that are in the majority, and they've been waiting years to be able to put in a bill to have a hearing. And why would they allow somebody else to bring in the bill? Well, I pestered and badgered and pushed, and eventually we had a hearing only because he went, LaHood that is, to the chairman of that subcommittee. Now, I never had a chance to talk to that chairman of that subcommittee, but rather than call a hearing, he said, we'll have a meeting. And that was the next best thing that I got out of it. And the meeting was held. Congressman LaHood and his aide and me, 2 members of the Federal Reserve, 2 members of the Congressional Research Service, 2 members of the Congressional Budget Office. And Congressman LaHood said, tell them about your bill. So I went through it and then learned why the Federal Reserve doesn't like it. Were you any of you surprised? And why Congressional Research Service, which I didn't realize was going to take such an active role in this. But anyways, you see, the Banking Committee and the chairman, he only did this because he was a friend of Ray LaHood. That's the only reason. Because he still had to honor the members of his committee. And it would have not gone over well if he would have allowed a hearing on this bill and some of his own members couldn't have a hearing on their bill. That is not going to happen. So Congressman LaHood, did what he did, but he didn't have really the interest that I wished he would have had. But that's where we are on this. So what I think we should do, and it's going to take an effort, but we could do it. There are 14 Democrats on this committee, on this subcommittee, and 12 Republicans. So the majority is 14. You got to get 14 votes out of that. You got to get 14 votes, and there are 14 Democrats, as I said, but 2 of the Republican members were on our bill each time we tried to get this bill introduced. Congressman LaTourette and Manzullo. Manzullo is my congressman. So what do? I maintain that if we could have a physical presence over a week in each congressman's district, go in ahead of time, telling that congressman, look, we're going to give you support. I know that this is an issue that maybe your constituents aren't familiar with at all, and they're going to wonder why are you, Congressman Ellison, Congressman Wexler, what is this thing? We could go in and for a week spend time there, call meetings, Chamber of Commerce, economic development committees, newspaper, so forth, and show how they're going to benefit from your good help, because you'll be able to show in each of these communities where the worth of this bill is. Every single community. So it would take time to do that, but this is the issue. I found that you don't need 1,000 letters written. You don't need 600, 400, 100, 50. There are congressmen that called up Congressman LaHood's office and say, yeah, we had this, we want to know more about this bill. And when I learned what happened was that congressman got 6 phone calls or 6 letters. I'm talking 6, 8, 4. That's what it takes. But it takes something. I said this in the past, I'll repeat myself, I know, but remember when Sonny Bono was alive and was a congressman? Well, Sonny Bono was a mayor at Palm Springs. So I thought a mayor would really go for this if he was a mayor and now he's a congressman. So I went to his office, had the meeting with the aide, explained everything, and he said, you know, well, we'll look into it, you come back. So I don't know, it was 3 weeks, I'm back in Washington again, and the aide said, you know, we asked around back in our district, and we found that nobody has ever asked about this bill. So therefore, we're not interested. Imagine that. Imagine that you could have the cure for cancer, but if nobody asked about it, well, I guess we won't, you know, use it. That is the truth. Now, in all fairness to the congressman, they have loads of issues to deal with. And they're very respective, first and foremost, and rightfully so, of the people in their own district. You know, here comes Ken. Where are you from? Northwestern Illinois? Hey, this is a California office. What are you doing here? You know, can't vote for him. So anyways, if we could go into these 14, 15, 18, whatever congressional districts and spend a week and preach what we know and have the evidence that we have and show the benefit that could be, that's where I think we can win this. Because the congressman needs that support. And we're the best at explaining to the constituents. Can you imagine the economic impact in those communities? They're all looking for jobs. They're all looking for people to come in and build something and thing in manufacturing. The headline in our paper yesterday was, hey, this hog farm's not going to come. Big hog farm, going to employ 200 people. They're not coming now. It's a slaughterhouse. They're not coming. Hey, that's 200 jobs. I don't care what they pay. It's 200 jobs. So everyone is looking for something, and we can show that they can get at some of the needs that they have if we can get this done. Now, quickly. So the number to know here is 21.1 billion. That's the loss of the federal government. And here, that's the number of congressmen we got to get on our side on that bill. Okay, conclusion. The winning plan. And that is, we've got so many things going for us. We've got the book, Steve's book, Lost Science of Money. We got that tremendous book. And we got you people. We've got these experts here that I take my hat off to and depend on. I depended so much on John Hodson, and when he gets honored on Saturday night, I'm going to be there and speak to and tell you what John Hodson did. And Bill Hickson. Bill wrote that piece in the blue sheet. And so many others. Bob Blaine and what he's done for me. And we've got these good people. So we've got the horses in that sense. And we've got the issue. So if we can have this communication with the sponsor of the bill, that sponsor is going to have to turn to us continually to answer questions, just like the letter that was written to Senator Conrad Burns, and to support this issue. And what the heck is this? The sovereignty? What is that? How does that work? And so he's going to ask questions, and that question is going to come then to Steve. Our sponsor is going to say, Steve, what about this question? Will it hurt banks? Okay, we can go to people like Ed Mrkvicka and others to help us on that. That's the communication that we've got to have. And we're capable of doing that. And Steve's position can say, okay, Bob Petit, you answer this one. And Dick, you're good at this. You answer this one for us. What can we say about this? And so forth and so on. Now, in the preparation, we've got to get our act together. Now, we're way ahead of it, in my opinion, in preparation with the book and other things. So we're way ahead on it. And now the third thing is the execution. We've got to have a presence in Washington at critical times. There's got to be a physical presence there. And we've got to go into those districts. That's the only way. We can't depend on going to Washington and talking to the aide or the congressman himself as enough. He's got to have and deserves the support of his community. And when we got something so good that he is going to reap the reward, the public in his district is going to be thankful to him. Now, somebody brought up, well, what would the bond dealers say? And again, I repeat, I know what they're going to do. They're going to come into these congressional offices, they're going to have real slick portfolios and so forth and so forth. And the congressman, we have to remind him, you can go this way or you can go that way. And by the way, your constituency know about this. And that is the moment of truth. But we have to educate them on that. Now, just like in an accident, if the medical people can get you to the hospital within 48 minutes, within that hour, that's the golden hour. You can be saved at a higher percentage than if it takes longer. This is our golden hour. The bridge in Minnesota helped us. And so many other things that are going on. Our debt, another 190-some billion is what the president wants to fight the war and so forth, so forth. So we got so many things going for us, and we got so many answers from so many good people. So this is our golden hour, and let's do it. I don't know if we have any time for questions.